Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Dr. Zina speaking. Today I prepared for you a special video in order to easily memorize the 22 skull bones. But before we continue, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below because it would really help me to grow my channel and reach many dentists worldwide. So we have 22 skull bones and they are subdivided into 14 they are facial bones and 8 are cranial bones. So we will talk about each one, and for each one I will simplify it as much as possible in order for you to easily remember it. So our skull is divided into two parts. The upper part is the cranial bones and the lower part is the facial bones. We have 8 cranial bones, and out of the 8 we have 2 they are unpaired bones, and these are the parietal bone and the temporal bone. Starting with the frontal bone, it is found on the forehead as the name suggests. Frontal located on the front part of your face, and this front part is referred to as the forehead region. Ethmoidal bone is an enclosed cranial bone. The way to remember it, ethmoidal, E stands for enclosed cranial bone. This bone, it is located deep inside that you cannot see it by your naked eye. The top part of the ethmoidal bone is the cribriform plate. The cribriform plate is a vital structure in that if there is any damage to the cribriform plate, this will lead to cerebrospinal fluid leakage, or in other words, CSF leakage, which eventually will lead to meningitis, which is inflammation of the meninges. So here is a clearer picture for the exact location of the cribriform plate. Next is the sphenoidal bone. This bone, it is butterfly-shaped bone. As you can see in the picture down below, it looks like a butterfly. The sphenoidal bone forms the central base of the skull, whereas the front part of the skull is the frontal bone, and the central base of the skull is the sphenoidal bone. Here is a clearer picture for the sphenoidal bone, and you can see behind the sphenoidal bone we have the ethmoidal bone that is located deep inside, which I told you that it is an enclosed cranial bone because you cannot see it easily. Next is the parietal bone. Literally, the parietal means wall, so it forms the side wall of the cranium. As you can see in the picture, the parietal bone is a paired bone in that it is divided into two parts. Between them is a suture, whereas the frontal bone is an unpaired bone. Next is the temporal bone that is located inferior to the parietal bone. The way to remember it, the word temporal has a P and the word parietal has a P as well. So always remember, temporal is located inferior to the parietal bone. Lastly is the occipital bone. Literally, the occipital means behind the head. So it is located just behind the head. And its function is for vision. And the way to remember it, the word occipital has 2 eyes and vision has 2 eyes as well. Now here I created for you a mnemonic to memorize the 8 cranial bones. From Paris to Estonia. From stands for frontal bone, then parietal bone, then sphenoidal bone, then temporal bone, then ethmoidal bone, then occipital bone. This is the easiest way to remember the 8 cranial bones in order to distinguish it from your facial bones. And we have only 2 bones out of the 8, they are paired, and these are the parietal bone and the temporal bone. And the way to remember it, remember the word but if you cut the lower circle, it will be PT, and PT stands for the parietal bone and the temporal bone. We have 14 facial bones. Out of the 14, we have 2, they are the only ones that are unpaired. And these are the mandible and the vomer. These are the only unpaired facial bones, and the rest, they come in pairs. Mandible is the only movable bone in the skull, and it's the strongest bone in the skull as well. Next is the vomer. Vomer, it will form the nasal septum. So here is a clearer picture for the exact location of the vomer that forms, as you can see, the posterior part of the nasal septum. Next is the nasal bone, and as the name suggests, nasal stands for nose, so it will form the bridge of the nose. Next is the inferior nasal concha, and the way to remember it is by dividing the words. Inferior means lower, nasal means nose, and concha means shell-shaped. So it is located in the lower part of your nose and it's shell-shaped. And the function of the inferior nasal concha is that it allows the air to flow in a steady, regular pattern with no any disturbance. Next is the lacrimal bone, and as the name suggests, lacrimal, it has a lacrimal duct, and the lacrimal duct is the tear duct. So whenever you cry, the lacrimal duct will be activated, that is located within the lacrimal bone, and you will start tearing. Next is the palatine bone, which forms the posterior part of the hard palate. As the name suggests, palatine equal to posterior palate, PP. So here is the exact location for the palatine bone, and this is the reason why the hard palate, it's called hard because it is composed of palatine bone, and bone is a hard structure. Next is the zygomatic bone. Whenever you hear the word zygomatic, remember it's the cheekbone. Cheekbone is the zygomatic bone. Now, as you can see in the picture, the zygomatic bone articulates with the frontal bone, sphenoidal bone, temporal bone, and the maxillary bone as well. The last facial bone is the maxillary bone, which forms the maximum part of the face. This is the way to remember it. Maxilla equal to maximum part of the face. Thank you all for watching my video. If you have any questions, don't forget to write it down in the comment section below and subscribe for more and more videos. Goodbye now.